Assalamu alaikum, Mukhtar, joining us. Uh, Before we start our conversation, I would like our audience to know about you and your works. So could you please introduce yourself, say a few things about your background and then about your work, and then we'll start.
Okay, thank you, Faisal. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and the audience about this important subject, which is budget. So my name is Mukhtar Ahmad Ali. Currently, I work with Center for Peace and Development Initiatives, which is a not-for-profit organization. Over the years, I have been working on a number of issues, including right to information, elections, budget transparency, local governance, and other similar subjects.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I have two very simple questions to ask you. One is that how our budget is prepared. If you could just walk us through at local government level, like tehsil government and district government, at provincial level and national level. During this budget making process, I understand that there are many opportunities for citizens to make a difference, to enter in the process, to have their concerns noted. But my understanding is they're not aware of it. They are not aware of where they can make a difference. And so they do not make the difference, and they think that we have no powers. So it is very important for us to understand it, our audience to understand it. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Faisal. This is a very important question. Generally, people think that budget is something that is prepared and approved in the month of June. But the fact is that budget is a year-long process. So in the month of June, the budget for the next year is approved, and its implementation starts in the month of July, on the 1st of July, actually. So budget for the next year is approved in the month of June, and the implementation on that budget starts on the 1st of July, and it continues until June 30th in the following year.
Yeah.
Yes, next year. And in the meanwhile, while the budget for the next year is approved and implementation is going on, then the preparation for the next year budget again starts. So let's say budget for 2022-23 was approved last year in June, and its implementation started on 1st of July 22. Now this continues, but when in October, November 22, the preparation for 2023 and 24 budget also started.
Okay.
So in a way, it's a year-long process. Typically, a budget circular is issued in October and November, whereby the relevant provincial government or the federal government or the local government requires different public bodies to prepare their budget estimates. So
this is issued by planning department at provincial level?
Yes. You see, if it relates to the development budget, of course, the planning department. If it relates to the current budget, then the relevant ministry does it.
Okay.
And then the different formats, of course, and the different public bodies and their offices are required to fill relevant forms, whereby they identify their needs when it comes to the current budget. And if it is about development budget, then development schemes are identified. And the relevant justification is provided that why, for instance, a particular project needs to be implemented. So once these are received, then they're put together. So let's say Ministry
of May I interrupt you if the circular which is issued,
Yes.
by P&D, Planning and Development Department or other ministries, say at provincial level, because now the financial and administrative powers have been devolved to provinces.
Yes.
Most of them. So once they issue a circular, does it only go to government departments, or is it circulated to the public also, or are they required to circulate it to the public?
It is typically issued to the government departments. But in some cases, especially in relation to the local governments, There may be requirement in some cases that you must consult common people. Sometimes these requirements are provided in the law, sometimes in the rules, and sometimes in the guidelines. Depends which particular government we are talking about. So the situation varies. But public consultation part is typically not emphasized much.
Okay.
The way our system works, but many often people either don't know about it, and while there is a requirement in the rules or the law or the guidelines, public bodies do not take that seriously. And in the meanwhile,
Okay.
people, when they are not aware of it, so they cannot benefit from that.
So the circular is issued, and they also issue the pro forma to these departments, and what we call is start generating the demand, right?
Yes.
To provincial government, right?
Let's say, Ministry of Health, Department of Health in the province. So they issue a circular for current needs. So it's sent to different hospitals, different health, different district-based authorities, and so on. So each one of them then list down their needs. This much budget we need for current for salaries. This much we need for stationery, for let's say repair and maintenance, and so on. And similarly, they do it for development needs, additional projects. So then these are received by, as far as the development needs are concerned, so these are received by then P&D. So then they put that together. And similarly, the current needs are put together. So then we have the aggregate figure for the whole department, how much budget is needed for development needs and how much budget is needed for current needs.
And that is how annual development plan is prepared.
Yes.
And that is presented for approval to the assembly, right?
Yes. So first step, as I mentioned earlier, the budget circular is issued. Different formations. Each organization within that particular department is required to provide its own estimates. So those estimates are then are received. Typically, the expectation is, but by January, these estimates are received.
Okay.
So then the departments start working on them. So they put them together. So it's a consolidated kind of a document which is prepared. So then, of course, they set priorities. They look at the available budget. They look at the have been received from the department, from different formations. And at that stage, one major problem is that typically the process is very arbitrary. So for instance, an hospital may have, done its detailed working and provided and shared its needs. But when it reaches the department may not consult the hospital and arbitrarily cut down on the needs, keeping in view their own priorities and the availability of budget. So they do, those adjustments. So once that document is prepared, then of course there are different committees which will look at that, and once those committees have approved that document, then of course it's ready for presentation to the cabinet.
These are committees of the
typically this document.
These are committees of the provincial assembly, provincial legislature, standing committees, or some other committee.
No, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have that practice in the provinces. These are administrative committees.
Okay.
So these are administrative committees. So so finance, for instance, Department of Finance may have its own committee. Similarly, P&D may have its. And once these committees look at that, so once that has been done, the whole provincial budget then put together. You see, and there are reviews at different stage. In our context, the problem is that at any stage, anyone can come up with a scheme, and if he or she has political scheme would just be inserted, and another may be dropped. So the problem is that the process, although the rules require that you ask for the needs from the local formations, then you put them together, and of course you ask for justifications and all that. Then when it reaches the committee stage, they should apply certain kind of a criteria. And on the basis of that, they should prioritize. So for instance, provincial government should ideally decide priorities in advance. so that when these committees review those documents, they have those provincial government's priorities, and in the light of those priorities, they make the determination. But here, the problem is the provincial government may not have set priorities through a consultative process. So,
Okay.
so,
There's no agreed upon criteria.
exactly.
And then people who are elected members of the provincial assembly or belong to the ruling party, they want to please their voters and to have a scheme in their area, they can push a scheme through and then get it approved also, making use of.
Exactly. So as a result, sometimes it happens that a scheme is inserted into the development plan at the last moment, and then no preparatory work has been done. So for instance, you even don't know what the budget estimates would be, and so on. So last minute it's inserted, so it even gets approved. And even when it has been approved, so then you have to start the work from the scratch, and the 6 months or 8 months or 9 months may pass, and you may not be able to spend a penny. So ideally, what should happen is that the schemes which are included into the development plans, so departments should have done some basic work on that, so that if they are approved, then they're ready to implement it, and the implementation can start from within the first quarter. So, but since preparatory work in many cases is lacking, so then implementation often gets dragged.
In recent years, can you talk about what the budget's priorities are?
You see, it depends on which province we are talking about or which government we are talking about. At the federal level, for instance, in the last PMLN government, they never really, at any public forum, they discussed what their priorities should be. But if we look at their actions, the priority was, for instance, poverty reduction program. So this allocated more money to program. Similarly, it was a political priority, so they started giving lots of funds to members of the National Assembly because election was close. So the problem is that typically, in many cases, governments do not really, list down their priorities and determine their priorities through a consultation process. Ideally, what should happen that there should be a separate session of the National Assembly or the Provincial Assembly where they discuss what needs to be done, and through that consultative process, even by consulting civil society organization, they list down the top priorities. But sometimes we can figure that out. So last PMLN government, for instance, their top priority was to address the problem of load shedding. So that is the top priority we know of. Because of their statements, or their budgetary allocations.
Their vote bank and their
Similarly, CPAC was
constituency
their priority.
wanted it. Yeah. So like
Yes.
Power outages, they want to address that, and through CPAC, they wanted to build infrastructure and create jobs also. But yeah, this is great. And also, I have an impression, and you can tell us to what extent it is correct, that most of the budget, even after approval, it is not spent till the last 2 months of the year, because then they start, in a hectic way, start spending it so that they don't lose their budget is not cut for the next year. So how it is spent?
Yes, this is.
Uh,
You see, I think a very good question. As far as the current budget is concerned, so the current budget is about day-to-day expenditures, about salaries, about stationery, about vehicles, fuel, about repair and maintenance. So that is kind of a steady process. So every month you spend certain amount of money. Even there may be savings. For instance, one major saving typically is that if there are vacancies. This vacancy should not be a problem, but when it comes to, let's say, education department or health department, so that may mean that at any given time, thousands of teachers who should be there are actually not working because there are vacancies. So on the current budget, you may be then saving money. So money is not being spent, although it was allocated. And here too, the practices vary. Sometimes provincial government doesn't allocate funds against the vacant posts. And then, they don't even fill that. So there's kind of unwritten policy that, okay, don't fill these posts. So and people suffer a lot, especially students, when these vacant seats involve teachers, or when and similarly patients suffer when these vacant seats involve dispensers or doctors. So this is about the current budget. So current budget side has its own types of problems. Similarly, in municipal service, there are a lot of sanitary workers required, and half of the seats are vacant. So then the situation of cleanliness will suffer. Okay, so another problem is that, even when, the PC1 is ready and the funds have been released, then the department will need to initiate the procurement process. And our departments, in many cases, lack the capacity for procurement. They don't have procurement experts. Most of the people working in our department, they either have the, let's say, the engineering capacity or the management capacity, but procurement expertise is lacking. But our government procedures require a comprehensive process for procurement. So they initiate the procurement process. The procurement process may take long. Sometimes, there may be allegations of abuse of authority or wrongdoing and so on. So matter may end in a court or something, so that process then gets delayed. So project execution suffers for that reason as well. Another major reason is that, the funds are not released on time. So if funds are not being released on time, or the procurement process gets delayed, or there is a controversy and matter ends in a court, so then delays take place. And as delays take place, the cost also increases, and the projects may not be completed on time. Now, this partly explains why, not much activity doesn't take place during the first 1 or 2 quarters, and then the activity paces up in the third or fourth quarter. And typically in the last 2 months, they spend a lot of money if their progress in the previous months was slow. And in this process, lots of inefficiencies and wastage take place. Because if you are, let's say, if you're doing a procurement in the last few months, so then you may end up compromising on the quality, or you may end up buying things which were not needed. At that time, there's a pressure. So let's say if funds had been allocated to a particular department for furniture or for equipment, and they didn't buy that, they could not buy that furniture or equipment during the first 8 months. And there can be a number of reasons. One reason could be that funds were not released on time. Now they have small time, and procurement process also has its own timelines. So then you may compromise, on that procurement process. And you will do that by conniving with the relevant contractors who provide equipment or furniture. So let's say you would say, okay, you may deliver that furniture after the month of June, but we will process your invoice beforehand.
Before that,
So
we'll pay you, yeah,
we will
to show
pay you.
that it has been delivered. Yeah.
Exactly. So when they make these kinds of deviations from the rules, so of course it doesn't happen for honest reasons. And one major reason why departments do it, of course, there can be personal and corrupt considerations, but they also do it for the reason because once the funds lapse, they may not get those funds in the next year.
Yeah. And
Because
their
you
budget
see,
will be reduced. Yeah.
their budget will be reduced. And actually, they will be judged unfavorably, because they said last time we provided you the funds, even if they provided them those funds late.
Yeah.
So they would say last time we provided, you couldn't spend those money. It means that you don't have the capacity to spend that money. So maybe this year you don't need that much money. So there are actually multiple reasons why funds cannot be spent on time, or there is a pressure on the last couple of months that you must spend that money.
Mukhtar, although this, yeah, you have shown us the very haphazard way that planning is done and the funds are managed and procurement is done. Can you tell us in what way the citizens can intervene to make a difference, to improve things? to
I
manage
think
it
citizens
better?
can do it in a number of ways. So I think one thing as a first step, one thing that citizens should do is to collect information during the month of June, let's say. That
Okay,
they should have the budget document available to them. So if citizens
okay,
know, let's say in a village, people know that a dispensary has been approved and it's included in the development plan. Now they should start tracking from there on. Now that they know that dispensary has been approved, they should write to the department. They should use right to information law. They should go and meet people and find out whether the funds for that dispensary has been released. If funds have not been released, then they should talk to those people why funds are not being released. So if funds are released, then they should know that who is now responsible to use those funds. And if there was a requirement to issue the contract or procurement was needed or whatever, so what are the different steps and how many steps have been taken? So if contract has been awarded and there's a construction of building required, then they should know who the contractor is. And if the contract has been issued, then why contractor has not mobilized yet? So if the work on the contractor has mobilized, then they can also keep an eye, whether work is being done in accordance with the specifications, and citizens should insist that they get the budget document. So if dispensary has to be built, how many rooms, what kind of materials is to be used, what is going to be the width of the room and length of the room, and what kind of doors are to be used, because all these specifications are provided in those documents which are agreed with the contractor. So the problem is that typically members of the community, they don't know about it. So if they don't know about it, they cannot really monitor. So in the process, the contractor may be compromising on the quality, but people won't know. And this can have very, very serious implication. So for instance, if quality of the building has been compromised, then, and if it's a school or a dispensary, then lives of the people or children may be at stake.
so Mukhtar, I want to ask a very simple question as a citizen, that this is very important, that I should have access to the provincial budget document.
Yes.
Where do I get it? And if I go to get it, I might be denied, saying that it is confidential document. This is usually what our bureaucrats do. You have the law that there should be transparency of information. You go to them, they say there is no document or it can't be shared. It is confidential. So where should one go to access the document?
As far as the federal and provincial budget documents are concerned, the detailed budget documents are put on the website. So they are
Okay,
accessible.
all
So
right.
to the provincial and federal government budgets, there is not a problem. But when it comes to local development plans implemented by TMAs, developed by TMAs, or local governments, Tahsil
So
local
district
government,
government or town government, yeah,
exactly.
when it comes,
So
yeah.
that's where they, in many cases, they don't have the websites. So they don't, it's hard to access those documents through website. So,
Okay.
so depending on the district, in some cases there may be websites, so a district like Karachi or Lahore. But if they are not available, then people will have to approach the relevant local government and ask for those documents. There's a practice here in many cases that they provide a summary and not the detailed budget. So you will have to really insist that I need a detailed budget. And if that is not provided, then people have the right to information and they can use the relevant right to information law and insist that this document is provided to them. In Punjab, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the right to information commissions have been very proactive. Similarly, at the federal level, situation is different in Sindh and Balochistan, but at least in these places, those documents can be accessed.
So if I summarize what you have said up to now, I think first and most important thing for any citizen who wants to make a difference is to cultivate connections within the government departments, whether it is tehsil or town government or district government or provincial government. Second is to access the budget document, detailed budget document. Third is to read that document. That is very important. No one else will do it for citizens. And fourth is then to monitor and track, how much money has been allocated, how much has been used, why it has been used or not used, where are the lapses in the procedure, and where difference needs to be made. And so these are the 4 steps they need to do. It can be done either individually or as a group of people. If citizens
Exactly.
don't do this job, then they should not expect good governance, right?
Exactly. But you see, the budget document will provide some basic information. So, for instance, the annual development plan would list down a scheme, a development scheme, and provide information about the allocation against that particular scheme. But you know, if you want, but for citizens will need more information. So, for instance, citizens will need information about the PC1 document. If on
Right.
the basis of that document, if the procurement has been done or a contract has been issued, so they should ask for the contract document and what is expected from that contractor. So let's say technical feasibility or specifications, you know, because for each project there are certain specifications which should be met by the contractor, let's say, or service
Right.
provider. So
So
citizens
they
will
need
also need
information
follow-up.
on costing and designing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. The contract document will give them information about the specification, design of the project, and
Exactly.
also the costing, how it has been costed. What you know?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where citizens can also find out whether cost actually is reasonable. Because
Right.
in some cases, there may be inflated cost. But people,
Yes.
I mean, if they do a bit of basic work, they would know that, whether, let's say, how whether it's inflated, whether it's reasonable, and so on. So they will easily find that out.
Yes. Okay, great. Because unless they have this information, they have no way to approach the authorities, question them, and insist on appropriate changes in the process of procurement, right?
Exactly. One simple example, let's say a boundary of a school is to be built. And the document says, it should be 6 feet high. But on the
Right.
ground, people find out that actually it's not 6 feet high, it's 5.5 feet high. So the contractor
Okay.
is actually saving a lot of money. So the people
Right.
should point that out. Now, this is
Yes.
one basic thing, but then there can be issues about quality. What kind of bricks are being used, whether adequate amount of, cement or more is being used, and what's the quality of the doors and so on, So what was expected from the contractor and what is actually being delivered.
Okay, great. I think this is wonderful. This is very precise, very useful, and very helpful for ordinary people who want to know about this.